Well, any way you cut it, that was a bit of history today in Ottawa. It always is when a U.S. president speaks to Parliament, and this was quite a speech. 50 minutes interrupted repeatedly with standing ovations by all in the chamber. So what does it say about Barack Obama and the relationship between our two countries? Andrew's here in Toronto. Chantal is in Montreal. Andrew, start us off in general terms. I mean, let's focus on the speech. I know a lot of things happened today, but that speech was kind of the centerpiece of the day. In general terms, what did you make of that?
Well, he was saying a lot of things that in another time you might dismiss as sort of bromides, but in current circumstances I think are worth repeating, of defending the international order of free trade and openness immigration, and of defending the internal politics that make that possible, of treating each other as equals, of not dismissing people because of their faith or their skin color, etc. This was directed at, all of the things that might be grouped under Trumpism in the United States terms, but more broadly at defending the international order at stake, what is sometimes called globalization, but is that idea of being open to each other as countries, being open to trade, open to immigration, and it was timely and important for him to say it. Chantal.
It was a great speech, but it also said something about the people who were listening to it in Parliament. The Conservatives, the New Democrats, the Liberals, all gave him standing ovations. And I think on most of the points that he touched on, the polarization in this country is much less than the audience that he was trying to reach, which I thought was outside the walls of the Canadian Parliament, because they are points of consensus for most of the members of this Parliament.
It was surprising in some ways that it was, you had to keep pinching yourself. He's giving this speech in Ottawa. There must be a lot of Democrats who'd wish he'd give this speech in the U.S., that he'd have a forum like that and give it and get coverage like that. And perhaps he will. Perhaps, he'll find somewhere in the next few weeks that he will. But nevertheless, he gave it here. I want to do something that we don't normally do. We normally run short clips, but I know a lot of people didn't get a chance to see this speech because it was on in most of the country during the afternoon. I want to run, kind of a major chunk of it and then talk about it on the other side. Here it is.
Democracy is not easy. It's hard. Living up to our ideals can be difficult even in the best of times, and it can be harder when the future seems uncertain or when, in response to legitimate fears and frustrations, there are those who offer a politics of us versus them, a politics that scapegoats others, the immigrant, the refugee, someone who seems different than us. We have to call this mentality what it is: a threat to the values that we profess, the values we seek to defend. It's because we respect all people that the world looks to us as an example. The colors of the rainbow flag have flown on Parliament Hill. They have lit up the White House. That is a testament to our progress, but also the work that remains to ensure true equality for our fellow citizens who are lesbian, gay, bisexual, or transgender. Our Muslim friends and neighbors who run businesses and serve in our governments and in our armed forces, and are friends with our children and play on our sports teams. We've got to stand up against the slander and the hate leveled against those who look or worship differently. That's our obligation. That's who we are. That's what makes America special. That's what makes Canada special. Here in Canada, a woman has already risen to the highest office in the land. In America, for the first time, a woman is the presumptive nominee of a major party and perhaps president. have a bias on these issues, but our work won't be finished until all women in our country are truly equal, paid equally, treated equally, given the same opportunities as men. When our girls have the same opportunities as our boys, that's who we need to be. Let me say this, because I don't feel particularly politically correct on this issue. I don't believe that these are American values or Canadian values or Western values. I believe, and Justin believes, and I hope all of you believe, these are universal values. And we must be bold in their defense at home and around the world, and not shy away from speaking up on behalf of these values of pluralism and tolerance and equality.
Barack Obama, this evening, late this afternoon actually, in Ottawa. We've often talked about the power of oratory and wondering whether this day and age just doesn't see it anymore, at least on this side of the Atlantic. Is he an exception, Andrew?
He's certainly an exception in Canada. We don't have a history of great oratory in this country. We have a much more managerial style of politics. There's more room for that in American politics. And yes, even by the standards of American politics, I'd say most people would say he's a pretty fair speech maker. He had a particular message today that allowed him to kind of climb the heights when you're talking about universal values. By the way, not sure that the campuses would really agree with that these days, but it was certainly something I like to hear. That's the kind of message in which you can build a more soaring oratory than just the nitty-gritty of trade deals.
Chantal?
But Obama is also a living illustration of the limits of the powers of eloquence. He has married that eloquence with the most powerful political job in the world, and look at the kind of debates that the United States are having as part of their election campaign. So to say powerful ideas powerfully does not necessarily mean that you are better at building consensus, or that you get an audience for those ideas. And I think up to a point, you know, to listen to this and then look at the debates that are dividing American society, and all of the not reaching of the Obama mandates kind of makes you pause.
At the end of the day today, we've seen this president probably for the last time in Canada, almost certainly. The relationship is different than it was a year ago when Stephen Harper was there. But how different is it really, and does anything that happened today really matter in terms of the relationship between these two countries, knowing that he'll be gone, one way or the other, at the beginning of next year? Who wants to start on that? Chantal?
Well, I don't think we can answer that question today. And that President Obama came to deliver what is a parting speech in no way ties the hands of a successor in any way, shape, or form. Some of the issues that were discussed today will not be resolved on his watch, and he won't be around to put his political weight behind them. It's hard to imagine that Justin Trudeau will find a soulmate that fits his persona as much as this president that is leaving in any of the other two, obviously not Trump. So the clear answer is I don't know, and I'm not seeing in any of what we saw today a guarantee that the relationship will be better or more productive in 6 months or a year than it has been.
Andrew?
Well, we shouldn't get too swoony about what a friend Barack Obama was to Canada. I mean, this is the guy who, for very political reasons, blocked the Keystone XL pipeline, for example. And while they had a much more close relationship personally, he and Justin Trudeau, if you look at, for example, some of the climate change stuff, it was a pretty bipartisan thing in this country that whatever we do is going to be not get out too far ahead or too far behind what the Americans do. We are looking over an election in the United States where we could have radically different presidents, depending on whether Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump is elected, with radically different implications for relations with Canada. So that's unusual. Usually there's some difference, but it's between the sort of 45-yard lines. We would be looking at a much different relationship with Donald Trump than with virtually any presidential candidate you could name.
the other question you have to ask yourself is, Canada wasn't big on the radar during the Obama presidency. And you can blame Stephen Harper, but you can also ask yourselves whether that is a sign of the shape of things as they are now. He was, it struck me today, the first president to come and speak to Parliament since 9/11. And it had been more than 20 years since a president had done so. Now, I looked at the history of those speeches, and the interval used to be a lot shorter. That is by far a record. But it may portend more for the future than the warmth of today's events.
Last word, Andrew.
I just want to reiterate how important it was for not just Canada, the United States, but also Mexico, for all of them to be reasserting their faith in free trade, in resolving to make this relationship a closer one rather than a more distant one. Again, at most normal times that wouldn't be news, but with given what's happening around the world, not just in the United States, but in Europe, this was timely to hear them say that.
All right. Good of both of you to join us tonight. Andrew in Toronto, Chantal in Montreal. Thank you.